Hello students, welcome to Read MedPrep Academy channel. Today in Environmental Issues Part 3, we shall discuss about conservations, carbon capture and carbon storage. Let us first move on to the conservations. Why conservation is important? India, due to its topography, geology and climate patterns, has diverse life forms. Now, this huge diversity is under threat due to many environmental issues. For this, conservation becomes an important tool by which we can reduce many species getting lost from our native land. By employing conservation management strategies like germplasm conservation, in situ conservation, ex situ conservation, in vitro methods, the endemic as well as the threatened species can be protected. Conservation movement was done at a community level, where a community level participation can help in preservation and conservation of our environment. Our environment is a common treasure for all the living organisms on earth. Every individual should be aware of this and participate actively in the programs meant for the conservation of the local environment. Indian history has witnessed many people movements for the protection of environment. What is this Chipko movement? The tribal women of Himalayas protested against the exploitation of forest in 1972. Later on, it transformed into Chipko movement by Sundarlal Bahuguna in Mandal village of Chamoli district in 1974. People protested by hugging trees together which were felled by a sports goods company. Main features of Chipko movement were this movement remained non-political. It was a voluntary movement based on the Gandhian thought. It was concerned with the ecological balance of nature. Main aim of Chipko movement was to give a slogan of 5 F's: fodder, fuel, fiber and fertilizer, to make the community self-sufficient in all their basic needs. It is primarily a forest conservation movement. It created a precedent for non-violent protest started in India. It inspired many eco-groups by helping slow down rapid deforestation. It stood up the civil society in India to address the issues of tribal people. It is seen as an ecofeminism movement. In 1987, it was awarded as the Right Livelihood Award. What is the success of Chipko movement? The movement has spread to many states in the country of India. It stopped felling of trees in the Western Ghats and the Vindhyas, generated pressure for formulation of a natural resource policy, achieved a major victory in 1980 with a 15-year ban on green felling of trees in the Himalayan forests. More than 1 lakh trees have been saved from excavation, started protecting forest slopes and restoring the bare ones. What is Apiko movement? The famous Chipko Andolan of Uttarakhand in the Himalayas inspired the villages of Uttar Karnataka to launch a similar movement to save their forests. This movement started in Gubbigadde, a small village near Sirsi in Karnataka by Pandurang Hegde. This movement started to protest against felling of trees, monoculture, forest policy and deforestation. Now, let us move on to the biodiversity conservation classification. It is of two types, in situ and ex situ. In situ, where the protected area network is done, which is a community protected, sacred groves and sacred lakes. Government protected, like the biosphere reserves, which may be terrestrial or marine. National parks, wildlife sanctuaries. Ex situ, biodiversity conservation, sacred plants and home gardens. Seed banks, pollen banks, field gene cryopreservation, botanical garden, arboreta, zoological garden and parks and aquaria. Now, in situ conservation means conservation and management of genetic resources in their natural habitats. Here, the plant or animal species are protected within the existing habitat. Forest trees, medicinal and aromatic plants under threat are conserved by this method. This is carried out by the community or by the state conservation, which include wildlife, national park and biosphere reserve. The ecologically unique and biodiversity rich regions are legally protected as wildlife sanctuaries, national parks and biosphere reserves. Here in this image you can see that the wildlife sanctuary helps in the prevention of poaching and capturing. The national parks protect not only the wildlife but the entire ecosystem, the flora, the fauna, the landscape and the historical objects. The biosphere reserve contains many protected areas. Normally, the biosphere area has a zonation. It has a core area in the center. Surrounding the core area is the buffer zone. Around the buffer zone is the transitional area. The human settlements are usually present in the buffer zone and the transitional area. Other activities like the research station, education and training, and tourism and recreation is done usually in the buffer zone and the transitional area, whereas the monitoring is done only in the core area. Megamalai, Satyamangalam Wildlife, Gindi and Periyar National Park, and Western Ghats, Nilgiris, Agastya Malai, and Gulf of Mannar are the biosphere reserves of Tamil Nadu. Now, what are sacred groves? These are the patches of grove of cultivated trees which are community protected and are based on strong religious belief systems which usually have a significant religious connotation for protecting the community. Each grove is an abode of a deity, mostly village god or goddesses like Ayanar or Amman. 448 groves were documented throughout Tamil Nadu, of which 6 groves, Banagudi Shola, Tirukurungudi, and Udayan Kudikade, Chittanavasal, Pudupet, and Devadanam were taken up for the detailed floristic and faunistic studies. These groves provide a number of ecosystem services to the neighborhood like protecting watershed, fodder, medicinal plants, and microclimate control. The broad classification of sacred groves is based on the number of sacred trees, based on the nature of human interference, based on structural framework, the land usage, and the religion. Now let us move on to the ex situ conservation. It's a method of conservation where the species are protected outside their natural environment. This includes establishment of botanical gardens, zoological parks, conservation strategies such as gene, pollen, seed, in vitro conservation, cryopreservation, seedling, tissue culture, and DNA banks are established. In this image, you can see that the ex situ conservation is done by field gene banks or seed gene banks, in vitro plant tissue culture, where the growth of the plant is done in a slow manner, cryopreservation, like the seeds, the embryonic axis, and the pollen are cryopreserved, and the DNA banking. These facilities not only provide housing and care for the endangered species, but also have educational and recreational values for the society. Now, what are the differences between the in situ conservation and the ex situ conservation? In situ conservation is an on-site conservation, whereas ex situ is an off-site conservation. Conservation of species in a natural ecosystem in an attempt to protect the endangered plants and animals is an in situ conservation. Whereas in ex situ conservation, the conservation of an endangered species is outside their habitat. It's an artificial habitat. And in situ conservation, the natural environment is present. Whereas in an ex situ conservation, it's an artificially created environment. Example of in situ conservation, the national parks, the biosphere reserves, parks, and sanctuaries. Whereas the ex situ conservation, the zoo, aquarium, and seed banks. In situ conservation is a dynamic conservation, whereas the ex situ conservation is a static conservation. In situ conservation, captive breeding is not effective in cases of all species, whereas in ex situ conservation, captive breeding can easily increase the numbers, only in case of some species. In situ conservation is cheap and convenient, whereas ex situ conservation is meant for commercial purposes. Example of in situ conservation is rhododendrons. Example of ex situ conservation, Kew Botanical Gardens in London. Now, what are endemic species and endemic centers and endemic plants? Endemic species are plants and animals that exist only in one geographical region. Species can be endemic to a large or small areas of the earth. Some are endemic to a particular continent, some to a part of a continent, and others to a single island. Any species found restricted to a specified geographical area is referred to as endemic. It may be due to various reasons such as isolation, interspecific interaction, seeds dispersal problems, site specificity, and many other environmental and ecological problems. There are 3 mega centers of endemism and 27 microendemic centers in India. Approximately 1/3 of the Indian flora have been identified as endemic and found restricted and distributed in 3 major phytogeographical regions of India, that is Indian Himalayas, Peninsular India, and Andaman Nicobar Islands. Peninsular India, especially the Western Ghats, has high concentration of endemic plants. Hardwickia binata and Mentinikia kondapanna are good examples for endemic plants. A large percentage of endemic species are herbs and belong to families such as Poaceae, Apiaceae, Asteraceae, and Orchidaceae. Here in this image, you can see on the left side, Bentinckia kondapanna. On the right side, you can see Bacoria cotalensis. Now, in this table, you can see some species of endemic plant. Bacoria cotalensis, it's a tree found in the southern western Ghats. Agastya Malai passiflora is a tree found in the peninsular India. Hardwickia binata is a tree found in peninsular and the northern India. Bentiggia kondapanna is a tree found in western Ghats of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Nepenthes khasiana is a liana found in the Khasi Hills and Meghalaya. Majority of the endemic species are threatened due to their narrow specific habitat, reduced seed production, low dispersal rate, less viable nature, and human interferences. Serious efforts need to be undertaken for their conservation, otherwise these species may become globally extinct. Now, let us move on to the carbon capture and carbon storage. Shortly, CCS. Carbon capture and storage is a technology of capturing the carbon dioxide and injects deep into the underground rocks into a depth of 1 kilometer or more. And it is an approach to mitigate global warming by capturing carbon dioxide from large point sources such as industries and power plants and subsequently storing it instead of releasing it into the atmosphere. Various safe sites have been selected for permanent storage in various deep geological formations, liquid storage in the ocean, and solid storage by reduction of carbon dioxide with metal oxide to produce stable carbonates. It is also known as geological sequestration, which involves injecting carbon dioxide directly into the underground geological formations, such as declining oil fields, gas fields, saline aquifers, and unminable coal have been suggested as storage sites. In this image, you can see carbon dioxide is captured at oil seeds facility or at power plant, and this carbon dioxide is injected into the geological formations like the coal beds or the saline aquifers or the salt caverns or into the depleted oil reservoirs. These oil reservoirs help us to enhanced oil recovery. Now, what is carbon sequestration? Carbon sequestration is the process of capturing and storing carbon dioxide, which reduces the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with the goal of reducing global climate change. Carbon sequestration occurs naturally by plants and in ocean. Terrestrial sequestration is typically accomplished through forest and soil conservation practices that enhance the storage carbon. As an example, microalgae such as species of chlorella, Cynidesmus, Crucoccus, and Chlamydomonas are used globally for carbon dioxide sequestration. Trees like Eugenia, Caryophylleta, Tecoma stans, Cinnamomum verum have high capacity and noted to sequester carbon. Macroalgae and marine grasses and mangroves also have ability to mitigate carbon dioxide. Here you can see the carbon sequestration options where the production of carbon occurs from the power stations, and this carbon dioxide helps in the production of chemical conversion to cement and fuels. And this carbon dioxide is utilized or inserted into the depleted oil or gas reserves, into deep saline formations, unminable coal beds, and enhanced recovery is done from them, and also into the oceans. And terrestrial sequestration also occurs of the carbon. Now, what is carbon footprint? Every human activity leaves a mark just like our footprint. This carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases produced by the human activities such as agriculture, industries, deforestation, waste disposal, burning fossil fuels directly or indirectly. Here you can see the carbon footprint where you have the great toe region, the fuel. On the right side is the automobile. The second toe is the water. Third, fourth, and the fifth toes are the carbon dioxide emissions. On the right side end is the electricity. Below is the personal and the transport and the gas production, recycling of carbon, offsets of carbon, and the waste disposal of carbon below. It can be measured for an individual, family, organization like industries, state level or national level. It is usually estimated and expressed in equivalent tons of carbon dioxide per year. The burning of fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. In turn, these emissions trap solar energy and thus increase the global temperature, resulting in ice melting, submerging of low-lying areas, and imbalance in nature like cyclones, tsunamis, and extreme weather conditions. To reduce the carbon footprint, we can follow some practices like eating indigenous fruits and products, reduce use of your electronic devices, reduce traveling, do not buy fast and preserved or processed or packed foods, plant a garden, Less consumption of meat and seafood. Poultry requires little space, nutrients and less pollution comparing cattle farming. Reducing the use of laptops. When used for 8 hours, it releases nearly 2 kg of carbon dioxide annually. Then line drying of clothes. Example, if you imported fruit like kiwi indirectly, it increases the CFP. How? The fruit has traveled a long distance in shipping or airliner, thus emitting tons of carbon dioxide. Now, what are the top options for reducing your carbon footprint? Average reduction per person per year in tons of carbon dioxide is given here. Live car free 2.04 tons. Battery electric car 1.95 tons. One less long haul flight per year 1.68. Renewable energy 1.6. Public transport 0.98 tons. Refurbishment or renovation of the buildings or houses 0.895 tons. Vegetarian diet 0.8 tons. Heat pump 0.795 tons. Improved cooking equipment 0.65 tons. Renewable based heating 0.64 tons. Now in this image you can see the carbon footprint, how our food can affect the carbon footprint. Car miles driven per 4 ounce is 118.29 ml consumed. Different foods have different impacts. Here's how the greenhouse gas emissions of 20 common foods are compared here. Here the lentils, which produce the protein of good choice of fiber and nutrients, produce less amount of carbon release into the atmosphere. Tomatoes, which are veggies, fruits low in fat and calorie, high in nutrients, which have high protein and good fat and more nutrition and conventional foods. When they are used, they produce less carbon. Egg, fish and chicken, which have organic rich omega fatty acids, should be used. Salmon, fish, pork, cheese, which are processed food, and beef and lamb, which are also processed food, have a more effect on the carbon footprint. What is carbon sink? Any system having the capacity to accumulate more atmospheric carbon during a given time interval than releasing carbon dioxide. Example, forest, soil, ocean are natural sinks. Landfills are artificial sinks. The three biggest carbon sinks are the ocean, the soil and the plants. Here you can see the carbon sink. The respiration of the roots and the microbial respiration helps in release of lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The plants that are present on the surface of the land produce lot of carbon dioxide, which are consumed by the plants for photosynthesis. What is biochar? Biochar is another long-term method to store carbon. To increase the plant's ability to store more carbon, plants are partly burnt, such as crop waste woods, to become carbon-rich, slow decomposing substances of material called biochar. The kind of charcoal used as a soil amendment. Biochar is a stable solid, rich in carbon and can endure in soil for thousands of years. Like most charcoal, biochar is made from biomass via pyrolysis, heating biomass in low oxygen environment, which arrests the wood from complete burning. Biochar thus has the potential to help mitigate climate change via carbon sequestration. Independently, biochar when added to soil can increase the soil fertility of the acidic soils, increase agricultural productivity and provide protection against small foliar and soil-borne diseases. It's a good method of preventing waste woods and logs getting decayed. Instead, we can convert them into biochar, thus converting them to carbon storage material. Here in this image, you can see the feeds of biochar, which are from the biomass, the carbon sequestration, biofuels usage, solid waste management and invasive plant management. All the carbon that is produced can undergo pyrolysis and results in the production of biofuels or biochar. This biochar is used as an adsorbent in the heavy metals, in contaminants, in organic contaminants and nitrogen phosphorus contaminants. The nitrogen phosphorus can also be used as a fertilizer, which is again contributes to the absorption by the plants and contributes to the production of the carbon. So the biochar is a very efficient adsorbent and used as a fertilizer. So today in environmental issues part 3, we discussed about the conservations and carbon capture and storage. Thank you. Kindly subscribe, like, share and comment our channel Read MedPrep Academy. Register for UG and PG MCQs in our website www.readmedprepacademy.com. Join Read Med Prep Academy for NEET, PG and UG preparation. Our Facebook ID is Read Med Prep Academy. Our email is readmedprepacademy@gmail.com. Our Instagram is Read Med Prep Academy. Kindly post your questions in the comment box. We'll reply with appropriate answers. Thank you very much.